I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought my Sunday dinner tradition would reveal the true colors of those I loved most. But that's exactly what happened when my son slammed his fork down and said those 7 words that shattered my world. You're out of this family. Get out. I thought family dinners brought people closer. For decades, that's what they did for us, every Sunday evening. The smell of pot roast would fill my kitchen as Walter and I welcomed whoever could make it to our table. After he passed, I kept the tradition alive. It was my way of holding on to him, of keeping our family connected. That particular Sunday started like any other. I spent the morning preparing Walter's famous pot roast recipe. I polished the silver serving dishes he'd inherited from his mother. I even used the good china, the set we'd received as a wedding gift 43 years ago. By 5 o'clock, everything was perfect. The house smelled of rosemary and thyme. The table was set with a crisp white tablecloth and fresh flowers from my garden. I'd even baked Walter's special buttermilk rolls that Austin had loved since childhood. When Austin, Madison, and the children arrived, I noticed immediately how tense they seemed. Madison barely made eye contact as she handed me the diaper bag along with 4-year-old Emma. "We haven't had a night out in weeks," she said, already scrolling through her phone. "The kids have been impossible lately. I didn't mind taking Emma. I never did. I loved my grandchildren more than air itself." Noah, my 7-year-old grandson, immediately ran to the kitchen asking about dessert. His energy always reminded me of Austin at that age. "Grandma made chocolate cake," I told him, ruffling his hair. "But dinner first, young man." Madison shot Austin a look I couldn't quite read. He shrugged and headed to the living room without greeting me properly. Something was off, but I brushed it aside. Family has rough patches. I told myself, it's normal. Dinner started pleasantly enough. I served the food while Austin talked about his promotion at work. Madison interjected occasionally, emphasizing how her connections had helped him. I noticed she was wearing a new diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she moved her wrist. The children grew restless quickly. Emma began throwing peas across the table while Noah whined loudly about wanting cake now. Not after dinner. "Noah, please use your inside voice," I said gently. "And Emma, food stays on our plates. Sweetheart." Madison didn't look up from her phone. Austin seemed determined to ignore the situation entirely. When Emma knocked over her milk and Noah began banging his fork against his plate, I felt a flash of frustration. This wasn't how Walter and I had raised Austin. We'd taught him about table manners and respect. "Someone's been letting the monkeys run the zoo lately," I said lightly, with a small laugh. It was a gentle joke, something Walter used to say when things got chaotic. The silence that followed was deafening. Austin's face darkened. Madison looked up from her phone, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "What did you say?" Austin's voice was ice cold. "It was just a joke. Honey, the children are a bit wild tonight, that's all." Austin slammed his fork down so hard the silver rang like a gunshot. The children froze. Even Madison seemed surprised by his reaction. "You're out of this family. Get out." He spat the words at me across the dinner table. I blinked. Candlelight flickering across his face, my son's face, and for a second, I thought he was joking. The look in his eyes told me he wasn't. Across from me, Madison dabbed her mouth with her napkin like nothing had happened. But I saw the smirk in her eyes. She was savoring this moment. "Austin, I didn't mean—" I started. "I'm sick of your judgment." He cut me off. "You're always criticizing Madison. Always thinking you know better. This is our family now. And you're not part of it anymore." My hands trembled as I placed my napkin beside my plate. 42 years of motherhood. Thousands of meals cooked. Countless nights spent worrying about him, loving him. And it had come to this, being thrown out of my own home over a harmless comment. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but my voice didn't waver when I spoke. "Remember this day," I said, keeping my eyes on Austin. "You've lost not just your mother, but your future." I walked to the guest room where my purse was and gathered my car keys. As I passed the dining room, Noah called out, "Grandma, where are you going?" I couldn't answer him. That tiny voice, full of confusion, Not hate it nearly broke me. But I wouldn't let Austin or Madison see me cry. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't scream or curse. I simply walked out with as much dignity as I could muster. The spring air felt cold against my face as I got into my car. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that I realized something profound. The house I had just left, the one I'd been thrown out of, was still legally mine. I didn't cry in the car, not on the way to Eleanor's, not even when I saw the porch light she always left on for me. Just like when we were teenagers sneaking back from parties. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she'd sensed I was coming. Sylvia, her eyes widened when she saw my face. What's happened? I couldn't speak. The words were stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat. Eleanor simply pulled me into a hug and said, "Stay as long as you need." We'd been friends for over 50 years. Eleanor and I, we'd attended each other's weddings, held each other through divorces and deaths, celebrated births and promotions. She knew when to push and when to just be present. She led me to her kitchen, put on the kettle, and placed a plate of cookies on the table between us. She didn't ask questions. She just waited. "Austin threw me out," I finally said, the words sounding strange in my own ears. "He told me I'm out of the family." Eleanor's eyebrows shot up, but she kept her voice steady. "What happened?" I explained about the dinner, the children's behavior, my comment, and Austin's explosive reaction. With each detail, it seemed more surreal. Madison was behind it, I sassy said. "You should have seen her face. She's been trying to push me out for years." Eleanor poured the tea and pushed a steaming mug toward me. "I never trusted that woman," she said. "But Austin, I can't believe he'd turn on you like that." "He's changed since they got married," I said. "It's like she slowly erased the man I raised." We sat in silence for a moment, the tick of Eleanor's grandfather clock the only sound in the room. "Where will you go?" she asked finally. "I don't know." The reality of my situation was beginning to sink in. "I guess I need to find an apartment." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "You'll stay here until you figure things out. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it." That night, I lay awake in Eleanor's guest room and replayed every second of that dinner. The floral comforter smelled faintly of lavender, and the clock ticked too loudly on the dresser. But all I could think about was the house. Not Eleanor's, mine. The one I'd built with Walter. The one I'd signed over to Austin last year. "Just for tax reasons," he'd said, sweet as pie. "You'll always live there, Mom. Nothing changes." I'd believed him. I'd believed my son. But thank God I'd listened to Walter. Before the cancer took him, Walter had made me promise, keep your name on the deed somehow, just in case. People change when money's involved. Sylvia. So I'd insisted on the reversion clause a technicality. I thought at the time, Austin had said, "Fine, no big deal." But it was a big deal now. I slid off the bed and padded into Eleanor's little office. She kept her files in tidy rows, labeled in her perfect handwriting. I found the one I'd brought with me last spring, house transfer emergency clauses. Walter's voice echoed in my mind. "People change, sweetheart. Make sure you don't sign yourself out of a future." I ran my fingers over his handwriting in the margins of the document. He'd reviewed it all before he passed. I remembered him bent over the dining table with a red pen, coughing between notes. He had circled the clause himself. "Ownership shall revert to the grantor under conditions of abandonment, misuse, or eviction of the grantor by the grantee." My hands trembled as I read those words again. Walter had known. Somehow, he'd anticipated this. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the possibility that Austin might one day turn against me. The tears I'd been holding back finally came. I sat in Eleanor's office chair and wept silently, grieving not just for the loss of my home, but for the son I thought I knew. At 3:12 a.m., I went to the kitchen and stared out the window with a glass of water in my hand. I could see Eleanor's bird feeders hanging in the moonlight, swaying gently in the breeze. Her quiet backyard felt like another planet compared to the house I'd left behind. My house. I saw Walter's hands again, planting hydrangeas under the living room window, his khaki shirt sticking to his back, dirt under his nails. I remembered him turning to me, laughing. This one's for your birthday. Sylvia. She'll bloom just like you. The kitchen. That was where I taught little Noah to roll out pie dough without tearing it, where we made banana bread together, and he asked if it was okay to lick the spoon, where Madison stood just 3 weeks ago, scrolling on her phone, ignoring the boiling pot until it bubbled over, and I quietly moved to turn down the heat. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I wouldn't just walk away, not from the home Walter and I had built, not from the memories we'd created, not from the future we'd planned. 1 week later, the call came, just after breakfast. I was sitting at Eleanor's little round kitchen table, folding laundry I didn't need to fold, just to keep my hands busy. Her cat, Millie, pawed at the sunlight pouring in through the window, oblivious to the turmoil in my life. My phone rang, and when I saw his name, my stomach clenched. Austin. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Mom," he said. His voice rushed and tight. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a situation." I didn't answer. I'd spent the week thinking about Austin, about our relationship, about how it had changed over the years. Austin had always been a sensitive child, easily influenced by those around him. When he met Madison in college, I noticed small changes at first. He called less frequently. His visits home became shorter. He began to echo Madison's opinions on everything from politics to the best way to fold towels after they married. The changes accelerated. Austin's warm, easy laugh disappeared. He became defensive, quick to take offense. Madison's ambition seemed to consume them both: the right neighborhood, the right schools for the children, the right social connections. I'd tried to maintain our relationship, to be the mother he needed. I babysit whenever they asked. I never commented on Madison's parenting choices, even when I disagreed. I gave them money when they were struggling to make the down payment on their first home. And now, here he was, calling not to apologize, but because he needed something. "There's something weird with the house title," he continued, trying to sound casual but failing. "The bank is saying there's a lien or a clause or something. They're refusing to refinance." Still, I didn't answer, just breathed slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. "I just thought," he stumbled over the next words. "I thought maybe you could clear it up." I finally spoke, calm and low. "Oh, my house again. Is it—" Silence on the other end. I could practically hear him blinking in confusion. "I mean, I know it was in your name at some point, but we transferred—" "You mean the house I built my marriage in?" I interrupted. "The house I raised you in, the house you threw me out of." More silence. I stood and walked to the back window, still holding Eleanor's dish towel. "I pulled the documents the night you tossed me out like a stray dog," I continued. "You never had full ownership, Austin. You signed that clause yourself." "I didn't know what it meant," he said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "No. You said it was just for taxes. I said it needed to be reversible. And your father, he made damn sure it was." Austin sighed, and for the first time, I heard something in his voice that sounded like fear, not anger, not arrogance, panic. "The bank needs the title cleared," he said finally, "or we lose the deal. The refinancing won't go through, and we can't afford the balloon payment without it." That got my attention. Balloon payment. What had they done? I wondered how many trips, how many granite countertops, how many designer clothes my house had paid for since Walter died. "I see," I said. "So suddenly I matter. Mom, come on, it's not like that." "No, just like how throwing me out in front of my grandchildren wasn't personal. Just like how Madison's smug little smirk that night wasn't a victory lap. Just like how every time I offered to help with the kids, you said no thanks, and then left them with me anyway." He was quiet, waiting. I walked back to the table, sat down, and picked up a piece of folded laundry, one of Eleanor's old towels, soft and worn around the edges. Useful, despite its age. Like me. "I'll speak with someone," I said. Austin's voice brightened. "Okay, great, thank you. But not for you." I paused. "For me, because I don't like strangers sitting in my living room, because my husband's ashes are buried under that hydrangea bush, And I'll be damned if the bank takes the land we poured our lives into. Mom, I'm just trying to fix this. No, Austin, I said sharply, my voice cracking like glass. You broke it. After hanging up, I sat motionless at the table. The conversation had confirmed what I'd suspected. Austin and Madison were in financial trouble. They'd likely taken out a home equity loan, possibly multiple loans, using my house, my home, as collateral. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was worried. No, that part of me was long dead. I couldn't sleep because I was angry. That hard, sober kind of anger that doesn't burn hot, but low and steady. The kind that makes you clean out a drawer at 200 a.m. just to feel in control of something. So I went back to the folder, back to Walter's scribbled notes in the margins. I sat in Eleanor's office in my robe, the little desk lamp casting a yellow pool of light. The document sat there like a shield. House transfer, emergency clauses. That was the tab I'd written in thick black marker last spring after meeting with Roger Wilson, Walter's old friend and our family attorney. Walter had insisted on these protections. People change when money's involved, he told me once, years before he got sick. Especially family. I don't want to believe it either, but it's true. So we keep a back door. Always. I'd rolled my eyes back then. You think our son would ever... I think love doesn't keep people honest. Paperwork does. I didn't argue after that. He was right. He'd always been sharper about these things. I was the soft one, the baker, the nursemaid, the glue. Walter was the bricks. And now that he was gone, I had to be both. I reread the clause again, the part that protected me. The reversion clause nestled right beneath all the language about transfer for tax optimization. My name was still tied to the property legally. The clause said the house must revert to me under 3 conditions: if I was removed from the home, if the property was neglected, or if any financial action was taken without my written consent. Austin had hit all 3 with flair. I'd brought the paperwork to Eleanor's house last fall after a strange conversation with Madison about consolidating assets for the sake of streamlining the family legacy. I hadn't liked the sound of it then. Now I was grateful I'd listened to my instincts. The next morning, I made myself coffee, dressed properly for the first time in days, and called Roger Wilson. "Morning, Sylvia," he said, cheerful as always. "How's retirement treating you?" I didn't answer right away. "I need to come in," I said. "It's about the house in Austin." His voice changed instantly. "I'll clear my afternoon." I hung up and stared down at the folder. Walter had been gone for 14 months. His garden had overgrown. His house was crumbling under his son's entitlement. And I had been sitting in the shadows, too ashamed to face it. Not anymore. I tucked the folder under my arm, picked up my purse, and kissed Eleanor on the cheek as she stirred a pot of soup on the stove. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "Yes," I said, walking toward the door. "To reclaim what's mine." Outside, the morning was cold and sharp. My breath puffed in front of me as I walked to the car. I hadn't driven in days. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the wheel, not from nerves, but from resolve. The house Austin threw me out of was still legally tethered to me. The son I raised wanted to erase me, but he forgot one thing: I raised him. I knew exactly how much of him was bluff and how much was panic. Roger looked older than I remembered. His hair, once salt and pepper, was now just salt, but his mind was still as sharp as a tack. He didn't waste time with pleasantries when I stepped into his office that afternoon. Just gestured toward the chair across from his desk and said, "Let me see the file." I handed it over, and he adjusted his glasses, flipping through each page like a man searching for a pulse. We sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes. The clock on the wall ticked louder than necessary. Somewhere outside, a truck honked and a dog barked. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. "Legally," he said, tapping the page with the back of his pen, "you never relinquished full ownership. You retained reversionary interest, which means..." He leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. "You can take it back." I didn't breathe for a second. My palms started to sweat. "Just like that?" I asked, my voice thin. He gave a small shake of his head. "Not just like that. It takes paperwork. A 30-day notice to vacate. Possibly court action if they refuse to leave. But the law is on your side. Sylvia, that clause is solid. Your husband knew what he was doing. I looked down at the folder again. Walter's red ink still visible in the margin. This stays. No exceptions. I wanted to cry. I didn't. Roger went on. You'll need to decide how you want to proceed. Quietly, formally, or through litigation. I can draft the notice today if you want. I nodded before I could overthink it. Yes, I want it. The notice. He gave me a long look, not judgmental, but careful, studying me like a man trying to gauge how much was grief, how much was fury. You sure you're ready for this? Sylvia, it won't be pleasant. I straightened in my chair. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. He smiled softly, not kindly, but with a kind of respect I hadn't felt in a long time. That's the Sylvia I remember. As he pulled out a new set of forms, I looked around the office. The same framed diplomas, the same dusty bookshelf with too many law journals, and not enough warmth. Walter used to sit in this very chair, going over estate planning and emergency documents like he was preparing for war. Back then, I'd thought he was being dramatic. Now, I saw it for what it was. Love, the quiet, watchful kind. The kind that leaves behind shields when it knows it won't be around to stand guard. Roger slid the papers across the desk and handed me a pen. Sign here. We'll issue a formal 30-day notice. If they contest it, we escalate. But honestly, he looked me dead in the eye. They're bluffing. They thought you were weak. I signed. My hands trembled a little. Not from fear, but from something else. Relief, maybe, or adrenaline. When it was done, I closed the folder and placed my hands in my lap. Roger stood and walked me to the door like a gentleman. Call me if you get anything threatening, he said. Emails, texts, voicemails, save everything. The more they flail, the easier our case gets. I nodded. Outside, the sun had slipped behind a cloud. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the parking lot. I walked to my car, the signed notice in my purse, and sat behind the wheel for a long time before turning the key. Austin didn't know it yet, but the house he thought he owned was already halfway back in my name. I drove back to Eleanor's house with the windows down, letting the spring air wash over me. For the first time since that Sunday dinner, I felt something other than hurt or anger. I felt powerful, not in a vengeful way, but in the way you feel when you finally stand up straight after hunching for too long. Eleanor was waiting on the porch when I pulled into her driveway. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. You're fighting back, she said. It wasn't a question. I am, she nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Good. It's about time. That evening, as we sat on her porch swing with glasses of wine, I told her everything. The clause, the meeting with Roger, the notice that would be delivered in the morning. What do you think Austin will do? She asked. I took a sip of wine and considered the question. He'll panic, then he'll try to charm his way out of it. When that doesn't work, he'll get angry. And when anger does not work, I paused, watching a firefly blink in the gathering dusk. That's when I'll know I've won. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Walter would be proud. Walter knew, I said softly. He saw this coming somehow. We sat in silence for a while, the swing creaking gently beneath us. The night air was sweet with the scent of Eleanor's roses. In the distance, a train whistle sounded lonely, but determined. Like me, I waited until Wednesday to make my next move. Midday, just after the school rush, but before Austin would be home from work. Madison didn't work, not really, but she had a standing Pilates class every Wednesday at noon. I knew their routine better than they thought I did. The street was quiet when I pulled up in Eleanor's old sedan. Parking 2 doors down, I left the engine running, stepped out, and stood on the sidewalk, camera in hand. From a distance, the house looked the same. My house. Same shutters, same brick walkway Walter had laid by hand one sweltering summer. But up close, I saw the truth. The hydrangeas Walter planted were yellowing at the edges. The lawn had gone to seed. The gutters were pulling away from the roof like they were trying to escape the place. I didn't cry. I took pictures. The overgrown front steps, the peeling paint on the porch railings, a broken garden gnome Noah had given Walter for his last birthday. I didn't recognize the place. It looked like no one loved it, because no one did. Not like I had. I circled the house slowly, staying on public sidewalk, careful not to trespass, just enough to capture the sag in the side fence. The wilted roses Walter had babied every spring. Even the front welcome mat was different, a cheap one that said "Live, Laugh, Love" in gaudy gold script. The one I'd kept there for 20 years said "Come as friends, leave as family." Gone now, like so much else. I took one last photo from the curb, the whole front of the house framed between two dying maple trees, and got back in the car. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Something inside me felt hollow and cold, like a room after the furniture's been hauled away. But underneath that, resolve. Not rage, not even sadness, just a clear, steady knowing. They hadn't taken my house. They'd abandoned it. That distinction mattered more than they knew. Back at Eleanor's, I uploaded the photos into a folder labeled Property Evidence Deterioration. I emailed them to Roger along with a short note. Photos taken 4/17 midday, while residents were absent. All from public access, no trespassing. Let me know if you need more. He responded 20 minutes later. Excellent documentation. This strengthens our position under the neglect clause. Keep any future evidence coming. They're building your case for you. I stared at those words. They're building your case for you. How fitting. They'd torn the place apart and handed me the very tools I needed to take it back. Eleanor found me later that afternoon, sitting in her sunroom with a cup of tea gone cold beside me. She studied my face. "What did Roger say?" she asked. "He says we have a strong case. The neglect angle is solid." Eleanor nodded, settling into the wicker chair opposite me. "What's really bothering you?" "Sylvia." I looked out at her garden, blooming with early spring flowers. "The children," I said finally. "Noah and Emma. They don't understand what's happening. All they'll know is that Grandma took their house away." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes gentle but firm. "And whose fault is that Austin made this choice? Madison encouraged it. You're just protecting what's yours." "I know, but it still hurts." "Of course it does. You wouldn't be you if it didn't." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching a hummingbird dart between Eleanor's feeders. "Have you thought about what happens after?" she asked finally. "After what?" "After you win, after they leave. What will you do with the house?" I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. The house was too big for just me. It would be quiet without the sound of small feet running down the hallway, without Austin's deep laugh echoing from the den. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's mine to decide. That's what matters now." The next day, I met with Roger again. He had drafted the formal notice to vacate cold, legal language that would be delivered to Austin and Madison the following morning. It felt strange seeing their names in black and white, being ordered to leave my home within 30 days. "Once they receive this," Roger explained, "the clock starts ticking. 30 days. If they haven't vacated by then, we file for eviction. Given the strength of your case, I don't anticipate problems, but we should be prepared." "What kind of problems?" I asked. Roger's expression darkened slightly. "They might contest the validity of the reversion clause. They might claim they've made improvements to the property that offset any neglect. They might simply refuse to leave and force us to go to court." He paused. "Or they might try more personal tactics." "Like what?" "Family pressure, emotional manipulation, using the children as leverage." He looked at me steadily. "Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Noah's voice calling after me as I left that night. I thought about Emma's sticky fingers on my cheeks when she wanted a goodnight kiss. I thought about the Christmas ornaments we'd made together, stored in the attic of the house I was now reclaiming. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm prepared." Roger nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then we proceed." Later that evening, I called my daughter-in-law's sister, Vanessa. We'd always gotten along well, even after Madison and I began to drift apart. She answered on the third ring, surprise evident in her voice. "Sylvia, is everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's something I need to discuss with you." We arranged to meet the next day at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Vanessa was already waiting when I arrived, a look of concern on her face. She stood and hugged me tightly. "Madison told me what happened," she said as we sat down. "But I wanted to hear your side." I studied her face. Vanessa looked like Madison's same high cheekbones, same auburn hair, but there was a warmth in her eyes her sister lacked. "What exactly did Madison tell you?" I asked carefully. Vanessa sighed. "That you made some harsh comments about her parenting, that Austin defended her, and that you left in a huff. She said you're now trying to take the house back out of spite." I nodded slowly, unsurprised. "That's not quite how it happened." Over the next hour, I told Vanessa everything: the dinner, Austin's words, Madison's smirk, the reversion clause, the state of the house, the financial troubles they'd hidden. She listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a small pad she pulled from her purse. When I finished, she sat back, a troubled expression on her face. "This sounds like Madison," she said finally. "She's always been calculating." "You believe me?" I asked, a little surprised. "Of course I do. Madison's been living beyond her means for years. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she doesn't listen." Vanessa shook her head. "Last month, she asked to borrow $5,000 for what she called emergency home repairs. I gave it to her, but when I visited last week, I didn't see any repairs, just a new designer handbag and shoes." My suspicions confirmed. I leaned forward. "Vanessa, I need to ask you something. The children, are they okay, really okay?" A shadow passed over her face. "Noah's been acting out at school. Madison told me it's just a phase, but—" She hesitated. "The last time I picked him up for our weekend together, he asked if he could live with me instead." My heart clenched. What could I say? I told him I loved having him visit, but his place was with his parents. She met my eyes. "Was that wrong?" "No," I said gently. "You said what you had to say, but it concerns me." "Me too," Vanessa admitted. "And Emma, she's so quiet now. She used to be such a chatterbox." We talked for another hour, comparing notes, sharing concerns. By the time we parted, I felt both validated and more worried than ever. "What will you do now?" Vanessa asked as we stood to leave. "What I have to do," I said. "But I'm glad to know the children have you in their corner too." She hugged me again. "Keep me posted, and if there's anything I can do to help—" "I will," I promised. Driving back to Eleanor's, I felt a new resolve hardening inside me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't even about Austin's betrayal or Madison's manipulation. It was about two small children caught in a toxic situation. Whatever happened next, I would make sure they were protected. When I returned, Eleanor was in the kitchen making soup. The rich aroma of chicken stock and herbs filled the air, reminding me of countless dinners around my own table. "How did it go with Vanessa?" she asked, stirring the pot. "Better than expected. She believes me, and she's worried about the children, too." Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. "Good. You need allies in this fight. Sylvia, the more the better." "What if I'm making a mistake?" I asked suddenly, voicing the doubt that had been gnawing at me. "What if this makes everything worse?" Eleanor stopped stirring and turned to face me fully. "Worse than being thrown out of your own home. Worse than watching your son become someone you don't recognize. Worse than seeing your grandchildren raised in a house of lies and financial recklessness." Put that way, the answer was clear. "No, not worse than that." "Then you're on the right path," she said firmly. "Now come help me with these biscuits. Idle hands make for worried minds." As we worked side by side in her warm kitchen, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since that fateful dinner. I was doing the right thing. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. For me, for Walter's memory, and most of all, for Noah and Emma. The formal notice was delivered the next morning. I wasn't present. Roger had advised against it, but I received confirmation by email that Austin had signed for it at 9:17 a.m. Now the countdown began. 30 days. The text came 2 days later. I was in Eleanor's sunroom again, folding laundry with the afternoon news humming softly in the background. My phone buzzed once on the armrest. I picked it up and saw her name, Madison. I hadn't heard from her directly since the night she sat smirking at that dinner table like she'd finally won. I expected something civil, maybe a clumsy attempt at apology or a shallow peace offering. Instead, it read, "Stop stalking us or we'll file a restraining order." That was it. No hello, no punctuation, just venom packed into 10 little words. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My thumb hovered above the screen as my eyes scanned the message again. Stalking, I'd walked past the house I legally still owned. I hadn't stepped onto the property. I hadn't spoken to a soul. This wasn't about stalking. This was fear. They knew something was happening. Now they were trying to rattle me before I rattled the walls of their little fantasy. I forwarded the message to Roger with a single line. "Just received this. Do with it what you will." He replied 6 minutes later. "Perfect. Documented threat. It shows they're escalating emotionally. That helps us, not them. Don't respond." I stared at his message, then at hers. And finally, I smiled. Madison had shown her hand. A restraining order against the woman who watched her kids, baked her birthday cakes, let her cry on my shoulder the first time she thought Austin might be cheating. She'd forgotten I had years of text threads saved, videos of the kids opening gifts I bought, notes she wrote me when she needed help and Austin was working late. She wanted to pretend I was dangerous fine. I could play the stranger she'd turned me into. I closed the message and slid the phone into my pocket. I didn't tell Eleanor right away. I didn't need to. She saw it in my face when I walked into the kitchen and began scrubbing the dishes like I was sanding wood. "She's lashing out," she asked quietly. "She's afraid," I corrected. "She knows something's coming. She just doesn't know how close it is." That night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the ceiling like I had on the first night I arrived. But this time, I didn't feel exiled. I felt ready. They thought they could shame me into disappearing, that I'd be too embarrassed to fight, that I'd fade quietly into Eleanor's spare room while they raised their kids in my house, under my roof, on my memories. But I wasn't going anywhere. Madison could threaten all she wanted. I'd lived long enough to know that when people stop trying to manipulate you with kindness, they'll try fear next. And when fear doesn't work, they panic. And when they panic, that's when I win. Austin called the next day. Unlike Madison's text, his call came with no warning. The familiar ringtone startled me as I watered Eleanor's plants on the front porch. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hello, Austin," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Mom," he sounded exhausted. "We need to talk about this notice." "I believe the notice is quite clear," I replied. "You have 30 days to vacate the property." "Mom, come on. You can't be serious. This is our home." "No, Austin. It's my home. The home I allowed you to live in under specific conditions. Conditions you violated." He made a frustrated sound. "Is this about what I said at dinner I was angry?" "I didn't mean it." "You told me I was out of the family and to get out," I said evenly. "You meant it at the time, and now you're facing the consequences. We can't just leave. Mom, where would we go? What about the kids? Have you even thought about them?" There it was. The children. Just as Roger predicted. Just as I had feared. "I think about Noah and Emma every day," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I wonder if they miss me. I wonder if you've told them why I suddenly disappeared from their lives." Silence on the other end. Then, "They do miss you. Noah keeps asking when you're coming back." My heart ached, but I steeled myself. "That's for you to explain to him. Austin, you made the choice to cut me out. Now you get to explain why." "Mom, please, we can work this out. Maybe we could, I don't know, pay you rent or something." I almost laughed. "Rent after you threw me out of my own house, After Madison threatened me with a restraining order for simply walking past the property I legally own, I don't think so. Austin, Madison did what. He sounded genuinely surprised. Check her phone, he said. The text was sent 2 days ago. More silence. Then, I didn't know about that. There's a lot you don't know. It seems. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I overreacted that night. It was a stressful day, and I took it out on you. It was wrong. His apology sounded sincere, but it was too little. Too late. Yes, it was wrong. And now we're here. So that's it. You're really going to evict your own son, your own grandchildren. You evicted your own mother, I reminded him. How did it feel, Austin, to watch me walk out that door with nowhere to go? Did you sleep well that night? He didn't answer. I didn't think so, I said. The notice stands. 30 days. Austin, make arrangements. I hung up before he could respond, before the tears threatening to spill could affect my resolve. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from a strange mix of sadness and strength I'd never felt before. Eleanor found me on the porch an hour later, still staring at the plants I'd been watering. Austin called, I said before she could ask, and he tried the children angle. Said Noah's been asking for me. Eleanor sat down beside me, her face thoughtful. Do you believe him? I considered the question. Yes, that part. At least, Noah and I were always close. I sighed. It makes this harder, knowing they miss me. It should make it easier, Eleanor countered. You're fighting for them too, in a way, for their future security, for the truth. She was right, of course. If Austin and Madison were in financial trouble serious enough to risk losing the house, the children's stability was already compromised. I was simply bringing the crisis to a head sooner rather than later, and on my terms. I just hope they understand someday, I said softly. Eleanor patted my hand. They will. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They see the truth, even when the adults around them try to hide it. Later that day, I received an email from Roger. The subject line read simply developments. Sylvia, it began. I've been contacted by legal counsel representing Austin and Madison. They're requesting a meeting to discuss alternative arrangements to the eviction notice. This suggests they're taking the situation seriously, which is good. However, be prepared for them to try negotiating terms that benefit them while appearing to concede to your position. I recommend we meet to discuss our strategy before engaging with their attorney. Are you available tomorrow morning? Roger, I replied immediately. Confirming the meeting. This was moving faster than I'd expected. A lawyer meant they were worried, but it also meant they were preparing to fight back. I needed to be ready. That evening, I called Vanessa again. Have you spoken to Madison recently? I asked after we exchanged pleasantries. Yes, actually, she called yesterday, asking if she could borrow money again. When I asked what for, she got defensive and hung up. Did she mention the eviction notice? No. Vanessa sounded surprised. What eviction notice? I explained briefly. Vanessa listened in stunned silence. Wow, she said finally. No wonder she's scrambling for cash. But why wouldn't she tell me pride? I suggested. Or perhaps she's embarrassed. Or maybe she's hoping to resolve it before anyone in the family finds out. That sounds like Madison, Vanessa agreed. She's always been obsessed with appearances. We talked a bit longer. Then Vanessa said something that caught me off guard. Sylvia, would it be okay if I brought the children to visit you? They really miss you, and Madison doesn't need to know. I hesitated. I don't want to put you in a difficult position. Vanessa, I'm already in a difficult position, she said firmly. My sister is making terrible choices that are hurting her children. I have visitation rights 1 weekend a month. This Saturday, I could bring them to Eleanor's for a few hours. What do you say? The thought of seeing Noah and Emma made my heart leap. But would it complicate the legal proceedings? Would it give Madison ammunition to use against me? On the other hand, the children deserved to know I hadn't abandoned them. They deserved some explanation, however simplified, of what was happening. Yes, I said finally. Please bring them. But let's be careful what we say about the situation. Of course, Vanessa agreed. I'll just tell them we're visiting a friend. They'll be so excited to see you. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about what to say to my grandchildren. How do you explain to a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old that their parents have made choices that will upend their lives? How do you reassure them without making promises you can't keep? I didn't have answers yet. But I had 3 days to figure it out. 3 days until I would see their faces again. The thought filled me with both joy and apprehension. The meeting with Roger the next morning was productive but sobering. He outlined the likely strategies Austin's lawyer would employ and helped me prepare responses. They'll offer to buy the house from you at market value, he predicted. They'll suggest a formal rental agreement. They might even propose subdividing the property. Reject all of it. We want full reversion, no compromises. What if they mention the children? I asked. Roger's expression softened slightly. That's the hardest part, isn't it? But remember, Sylvia, you're not taking anything from the children. You're reclaiming what's yours. Austin and Madison have options. They're not destitute. They're just facing the consequences of their choices. I nodded, though the knot in my stomach remained. And if they go to court, then we go to court, Roger said simply. And we win. The law is on our side. The documentation is on our side. Even their own behavior is on our side. We spent the next hour reviewing documents, practicing responses to likely arguments, and strengthening our position. By the time I left his office, I felt more confident. Not happy, exactly, but certain I was on the right path. That certainty was tested the very next day when I received an email from Austin's lawyer. It was formal, polite, and deeply manipulative. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Austin Harper, believe this action is unjustified and deeply distressing. They request that you withdraw the notice and instead initiate mediation to resolve this matter with sensitivity to the family unit. Mr. and Mrs. Harper are willing to discuss fair compensation for any perceived grievances. Sensitivity to the family unit. After Madison stood there and watched me carry my suitcase out like a hired maid being dismissed, after Austin told me I was no longer part of the family, now suddenly the family unit mattered. I forwarded the email to Roger without comment. He replied within minutes, "We decline mediation. You are acting within your full legal rights as partial title holder with reversionary interest. Let them prepare for court if they wish to contest." Court. The word still made my stomach clench. Public proceedings. Our family's dirty laundry aired for all to see. Austin's betrayal. Madison's manipulation. My eviction of my own son and his family. None of it was pretty. All of it was painful. But I had come too far to turn back now. The house wasn't just a building. It was Walter's legacy. It was the place where we had built our lives together. It was the physical embodiment of our love story. And I wouldn't let it be leveraged, neglected, or taken from me. That night, I opened a new journal and began to write. Not for court, not for proof, but for myself. April 21st, 9 days until the deadline. They're afraid. I thought I would feel small, like a vengeful old woman with nothing to lose. But I felt steady. I felt clean. They had pushed me out and thought I'd crumble. But I had kept records. I had kept my voice. And now I was using both. When Eleanor came in with tea, she paused beside me. "They're still fighting?" she asked. I nodded. "They'll lose," she said simply. Then she kissed the top of my head and walked away. And I knew she was right. The law was mine. The house was mine. And slowly, so was my name again. Not Austin's mom, not Grandma Sylvia, not the woman who used to live here, just Sylvia, a woman reclaiming her power, one document at a time. Saturday arrived, bringing with it a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. I spent the morning cleaning Eleanor's already spotless guest room, arranging the stuffed animals I'd bought for Noah and Emma on the bed, baking chocolate chip cookies, their favorite. Eleanor watched my frantic preparations with amusement. They're children. Sylvia, not the Queen of England. They'll just be happy to see you. She was right, of course, but I needed the distraction. needed to channel my anxiety into something productive, needed to feel like I was preparing a home, however temporary, for my grandchildren. Vanessa arrived at exactly noon, as promised. I watched from the window as she helped Noah and Emma out of the car. Noah looked taller than I remembered, his dark hair falling into his eyes in a way that reminded me painfully of Austin at that age. Emma clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, the one I had given her for her 3rd birthday. I opened the door before they reached it. Noah saw me first. His eyes widened, then his whole face lit up. "Grandma," he shouted. Breaking away from Vanessa and running toward me, I knelt to catch him as he threw himself into my arms. "Oh, my sweet boy," I whispered, holding him tight. "I've missed you so much." Emma was more cautious, hanging back by Vanessa's side until she was sure it was really me. Then she too came forward, moving with the deliberate dignity of a 4-year-old princess. "Hi, Gamma," she said solemnly, holding out her rabbit for inspection. "Hoppy missed you." I knelt down to her level. "I missed Hoppy too, and I missed you even more." She considered this, then nodded and allowed me to hug her, over her shoulder. I met Vanessa's eyes. She was smiling, but there was worry there too. We spent the next few hours in a bubble of joy. We baked cookies, we read stories, we built a fort in Eleanor's living room using sheets and chair backs. Noah showed me his latest drawings. Emma practiced the new dance she had learned in preschool. It was perfect and heartbreaking all at once. When it was time for them to leave, Noah grew serious. "Grandma," he said, his small face scrunched with concern. "Why don't you come home anymore? Did we do something bad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I glanced at Vanessa, who shook her head slightly, a warning not to say too much. "No, sweetheart," I said carefully. "You didn't do anything bad. Grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, and right now, your daddy and I are trying to figure some things out. But you'll come back." "Right," he persisted. "You'll come home again. Home. My home. The home Austin was now legally obligated to leave within 3 weeks. "Things will change soon," I said, choosing my words with care. "But no matter what happens, I will always be your grandma. I will always love you, and we will always find a way to be together. Okay." He nodded, not entirely satisfied, but willing to accept my answer for now. Emma was simpler. She just hugged me and said, "Love you, Gamma." Before skipping back to Vanessa's car. After they left, I sat on Eleanor's porch and cried for the first time in days. Not from sadness, exactly, but from the overwhelming complexity of love and loss and family. Eleanor found me there as the sun was setting. She didn't speak, just sat beside me and placed her hand over mine. "They're so precious," I said finally. "And they don't understand any of this." "They understand more than you think," Eleanor replied. "Children always do. I'm afraid of hurting them." "You're not the one hurting them. Sylvia, remember that. You're trying to create stability in a situation Austin and Madison have made unstable." I nodded, clinging to her words like a lifeline. Whatever happened next, I would keep the children at the center of my thoughts. They deserved better than what their parents were giving them. They deserved truth, even when it was difficult. They deserved a home built on love, not leveraged debts and secrets. And if reclaiming my house meant temporarily disrupting their lives, I would make sure they landed somewhere safe, somewhere they could thrive, somewhere their grandmother could still bake them cookies and read them stories and remind them they were loved. The next week would bring the showdown I had been preparing for, Austin and Madison versus me, with Roger by my side. But today had reminded me what I was really fighting for. Not just bricks and mortar, but the future. Noah's future. Emma's future. And my own. Court was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the tone. No family warmth. No second chances. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the shuffle of papers over oak desks. The kind of place where truth doesn't need tears to be real. I arrived early, dressed in a navy suit I hadn't worn since Walter's funeral. Eleanor insisted on driving me, waiting in the hallway while Roger and I reviewed our strategy one last time. "Remember," he said, his voice low. "They'll try to make this emotional. They'll try to paint you as vindictive. Don't take the bait. We stick to the facts, the reversion clause, the documented neglect, your legal eviction from the premises." I nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my skirt. "What if they bring up the children?" "They will," Roger said simply. "It's their strongest emotional argument, but legally, it's irrelevant. The judge will know that. And Madison's text the restraining order threat. We'll introduce it if they try to claim harassment or any form of intimidation on your part. Otherwise, we let it speak for itself in our documentation." As we entered the courtroom, I spotted Austin immediately. He sat 2 tables away, shoulders hunched, tie crooked. His lawyer, a slick-looking man with silver hair and an expensive suit, was arranging papers with practiced efficiency. Madison wasn't there. That said enough. "Where's his wife?" Roger whispered as we took our seats. "Probably couldn't face me," I replied. Or maybe she couldn't face the truth. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Elena Ramirez entered. A stern-looking woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. "Harper versus Harper," she said. "Property dispute involving reversion of deed. Let's begin." Austin's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, this case represents an unfortunate family disagreement that has escalated unnecessarily. My client, Mr. Austin Harper, received this property from his mother as a gift. Now, following a minor verbal altercation, Mrs. Harper is attempting to reclaim the property, displacing her own son and grandchildren." I felt my blood pressure rising but kept my face neutral. A minor verbal altercation. Is that what they were calling it, the deed transfer? He continued. Was intended to be permanent. Mr. Harper has invested significant resources in the property and established it as his family home. This action by Mrs. Harper is vindictive and serves no purpose but to punish her son for a momentary lapse in judgment. Judge Ramirez nodded, making notes. "And the reversion clause clearly stated in the deed." Austin's lawyer hesitated. "We contend that my client was not fully informed of the implications of that clause. He understood it to be a formality, not a mechanism that could be triggered by a family disagreement." Now it was Roger's turn. He placed the documents in front of the judge like he was setting down a sword, calm, certain. "Your Honor," he said, "we submit that my client retained legal ownership under the reversion clause clearly stated in the deed. These terms were agreed upon at the time of transfer and are being enforced now due to conditions of neglect, abandonment, and wrongful eviction." He laid out the proof piece by piece, the reversion clause initialed by Austin himself, the photos of the property's decay, the texts from Madison, the bank's rejection letter citing title issues, my written affidavit recounting the night I was told. "You're out of this family." Austin's lawyer tried to object, claiming it was a family matter, that the transfer was intended to be permanent, that I was overreacting. Roger didn't even flinch. "If the defendant believed it was permanent," he said, "why did he sign a clause that specifically states otherwise? This isn't about family. This is about legal ownership." Austin didn't look at me. Not once. He sat there, eyes locked on the table as the judge flipped through the papers. The silence stretched so long I could hear someone coughing in the hallway. Finally, Judge Ramirez spoke. "In reviewing this deed, I see no ambiguity in the clause. Ownership was conditional. That condition has been broken." She paused, looked directly at Austin. "Mr. Harper, you do not own this house." It hit me all at once. The gavel hadn't even fallen yet, but the words rang final. She continued, "You are hereby ordered to vacate the property within 15 days. Failure to do so will result in forced removal and additional damages." 15 days. That was all they had left. Austin didn't speak. He didn't argue. He looked hollow, like the wind had gone out of him. As I stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of him from the corner of my eye, slouched in his chair, staring down at hands that had once been soft and childlike in mine. He looked like a boy again, a lost one. But I didn't go to him. Not this time. Outside, the sun was warm and strange, almost disrespectful after such a cold room. Roger walked beside me down the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. "You did it," he said softly. I nodded, but it didn't feel like winning. Not entirely. It felt like survival, like waking up after surgery scarred, but breathing. Eleanor was waiting in the car, her face anxious until she saw my expression. "It's over. It's over," I confirmed as I slid into the passenger seat. 15 days. She squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I looked out the window at the courthouse, solid and immovable behind us. "I don't know yet." That evening, Eleanor poured me a glass of red wine and said, "To the end of something?" I raised mine, eyes steady. "No, to the beginning." I sat on her porch long after she went to bed, listening to the rustle of leaves, the soft groan of old wood under my chair. The house was mine again, and now the door was finally closing on the people who thought they could own me without loving me. But as I sat there, watching the moon rise over Eleanor's garden, I realized I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet certainty that I had done what was necessary, for myself, for Walter's memory, and yes, even for Noah and Emma, who deserved better than to grow up in a home built on deceit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the practical matters of reclaiming a house, the emotional reckoning of what had been lost. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply be. A woman who had stood her ground, a mother who had chosen truth over appeasement, a grandmother who would find a way to protect the children she loved, even if it meant upending their world for a time. The message came exactly 7 days later, not from Madison, from Austin. A single text, no greeting, no punctuation. "I'm sorry," that was it. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. Not to respond, I wasn't foolish, but just to absorb it. I let myself feel whatever needed to rise. But nothing came. Not anger, not relief, just emptiness. By the time that text arrived, I had already heard the rest from a neighbor who still talked to Eleanor. Madison was gone. Packed up the kids and left the same day the ruling hit. Took her things and not much else. No forwarding address. Just a quiet exit. Not a goodbye. Apparently, she'd been staying for the house, for the security, for the legacy she thought would be hers. Once the title vanished, so did her love. Austin was alone now. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just scheduled the locksmith. He came that Friday morning, a short man with kind eyes and coffee on his breath. He greeted me like any other job. "You moving into a new place?" he asked casually, tugging at the old deadbolt. "No," I said, watching him work. "Just returning to one." It took him 12 minutes to change every lock. When he handed me the new set of keys, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just held them in my palm like something sacred. Metal, cold, solid. I walked around the outside of the house once before going in. The front garden was worse than before. Weeds choking the last of Walter's hydrangeas. The lawn was bare in patches, like it had given up, too. But I could fix it. In time, I would. I stepped up to the door, pressed the new key into the lock, and turned it. It clicked open with a sound so soft I almost missed it. Inside, the air was musty and stale. The curtains were drawn tight. The floors hadn't been swept in weeks. Toys and dishes still scattered around like someone had been interrupted mid-life. But this was no longer their place to finish. I walked through slowly. One room, then the next. My feet remembered the creaks in the floorboards. My eyes went to the walls where Noah once drew with crayons. They'd painted over it, sloppy, but I could still see the outline of a sun with a smiley face. I touched it with 2 fingers. Briefly. That afternoon, I changed the bedding in my old room. I opened every window. I took out the trash. I folded what was left of their laundry and placed it in a box by the front door with a note. "I won't keep what doesn't belong to me." And that included them. When I left that evening, just for a night to let the house breathe. I locked the door behind me with the new keys. Austin never responded to the court ruling, never asked for time, never even came to pick up the box. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the silence that followed. A silence without tension, without guilt. A silence that meant freedom. I stepped back into the house 2 days later. Alone this time. For good. No Eleanor waiting outside. No locksmith fiddling with bolts. No eyes watching me from behind curtains. Just me, the key, and the quiet. The front hallway still smelled faintly of their air freshener. Fake citrus and something musky Madison must have thought was elegant. I opened every window again, let the breeze chase the staleness out, and then I stood there in the middle of the house and waited for the grief to come. It didn't. I thought I might crumble when I touched the wall where Noah's crayon sons once lived. I thought I'd sob when I passed the kitchen island, where I used to teach Emma how to crack eggs without getting shell in the batter. But all I felt was steady. Not hard, not numb, just steady. Because this wasn't their house anymore. And it wasn't a memory box frozen in time. It was mine again. The good, the bad, the bruised wood and the stubborn radiator and the photo nail still sticking out of the hallway molding. All of it. I unpacked one box that night, just one. The one marked Walter Kitchen. Inside was his old apron, the faded blue one with King of the Grill written across the front in cracked letters. He used to wear it even when we were just scrambling eggs. Said it made him feel like he was doing something important. I hung it on the hook by the back door, exactly where it used to be. Then I opened the silverware drawer. Empty. I smiled. I went to the hall closet and took out the spare set I'd kept hidden for years, tucked into a shoebox behind an old quilt. The box still smelled like cedar and lemon oil. I slid it into the drawer, one piece at a time. It felt like setting the table for myself. No guests, no performances, no asking for love in exchange for food. Just a drawer, just a woman, just a home. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee and listened to the house settle. The creaks were the same. The wind moved through the screen door like it always had. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A car drove by. Life didn't stop for any of it. I thought I'd feel lonely. And in some ways, I did. But it was a clean loneliness. The kind that doesn't ache. The kind that clears room. I thought of Austin's last message. I'm sorry. 3 words. Sent too late. Sent when there was nothing left to take. He hadn't come back for the box. I gave it to Eleanor. Let her decide what to do with it. As for Madison, she never resurfaced, never called, never even asked what happened to the house she once treated like a trophy. That silence told me everything. I finished my coffee and walked back inside. The floor groaned under my steps, familiar and forgiving. I turned out the lights one by one. This house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed. And so did I. A month later, I was kneeling in the front garden, digging out weeds that had strangled Walter's beloved hydrangeas. The May sun warmed my back as I worked, carefully loosening the soil around the surviving plants. They would bloom again with care, just like me. I'd spent the past weeks reclaiming the house, room by room, scrubbing walls, repairing what was broken, replacing what couldn't be fixed. I painted the kitchen a warm yellow that Walter had always favored. I hung new curtains in the living room. I sanded down the scratches in the hardwood floors and polished them until they gleamed. It was hard work, physically demanding for a woman my age. But each ache, each blister felt like a badge of honor. This was my home, and I was bringing it back to life. Eleanor helped when she could, coming over with homemade lemonade and sandwiches. "You're working too hard," she'd say, even as she rolled up her sleeves to help me move furniture. "It feels good," I'd reply. And it did. Every nail I hammered, every shelf I hung, every cabinet I organized was an act of reclamation. Roger stopped by occasionally to check on me. He brought me a housewarming gift, a beautiful wind chime for the back porch. "Thought you might like something new," he said. "Something that's just yours." I hung it that evening, listening to its gentle melody as the breeze picked up. It was a kind gesture, more personal than our professional relationship had been. I wondered if, in another life, there might have been something more there. But for now, I was content to be alone with my house and my memories. Vanessa called regularly, giving me updates on Noah and Emma. Madison had taken them to her parents' home in Arizona. She told me. They were living there while she figured things out. "Have you heard from Austin?" she asked during one of our calls. "No," I said. "Not since his text." "He's still in town," she said. "Living in an apartment downtown. He looks terrible." I didn't respond to that. I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for him. Not yet. But I did miss my grandchildren desperately. "The kids ask about you," Vanessa continued. "Noah wanted me to send you this." She texted me a photo of a crayon drawing a house with a smiling sun above it and 3 figures outside a tall one and 2 small ones. My heart clenched. I saved the image and had it printed and framed that same day. The weather grew warmer as May turned to June. I established a new routine: morning coffee on the back porch, gardening until the heat became too much, lunch with Eleanor, or sometimes alone with a book, afternoons spent on home improvements or baking or simply sitting in the silence I'd come to cherish. I was pruning roses one Saturday when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Not Eleanor's, she was visiting her daughter in Chicago that weekend. Not Roger's, our legal business was concluded. I set down my garden shears and walked around to the front of the house, shielding my eyes from the sun. Austin stood there, hands in his pockets, looking up at the house like he was seeing it for the first time. He'd lost weight. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, and his face had a gauntness I didn't recognize. He turned when he heard my footsteps on the gravel. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't rush to him. I didn't yell. I simply stood there, waiting. "The garden looks good," he said after a moment. "You've been working hard." I nodded. "It needed attention." "So did a lot of things," he said quietly. "I see that now." I didn't invite him in right away. We stood there in the driveway, the sun beating down on both of us, the silence stretching between us like a living thing. "Madison left," he said finally. "Took the kids to her parents' place in Arizona." "I know. Vanessa told me." He looked surprised at that. "You and Vanessa talk." "We do. She brings me drawings from Noah." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know." "Austin." He nodded, accepting the criticism. "I deserve that," I sighed, feeling suddenly tired. Not angry, just weary of standing in the heat, rehashing pain. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see the house," he said. Then, more honestly, "I wanted to see you, to apologize properly, not by text." I studied his face, looking for the manipulative tactics Roger had warned me about. But all I saw was exhaustion and regret. Not the calculated remorse of someone trying to get something, but the genuine sorrow of someone who has lost everything and knows it's his own fault. "Would you like to come in?" I asked finally. "I just made lemonade." He looked up, surprised. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd like that." We sat in the kitchen, at the table where our family had gathered countless times before. The yellow walls seemed to hold the sunlight, making the room warmer, more inviting than it had been under Madison's cold, gray design scheme. "You've changed things," Austin said, looking around. "I've restored things," I corrected gently. "To how they were, to how they should be." He nodded, turning the glass of lemonade in his hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry." What I said that night. He trailed off, unable to find words adequate to the betrayal. "You told me I was out of the family," I said, naming it for him. "You threw me out of my own home." "Yes." He didn't try to soften it or explain it away. "And there's no excuse for that." "None." "Why?" I asked simply. It was the question that had haunted me for months. Austin set down his glass and rubbed his face with both hands. "I was drowning," he said finally. "Madison and I were fighting constantly. The refinance was falling through. We were in debt up to our eyeballs from her spending. The kids were acting out because they could feel the tension." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "And then you made that comment about the kids, and I just snapped. All the pressure, all the fear, all the failure, I turned it on you because you were safe. Because I knew you'd always love me. No matter what." The irony wasn't lost on me. So you hurt me because you knew I would still love you. Yes, he admitted. It's horrible. It's inexcusable. But that's the truth. I took a sip of my lemonade, letting the tart sweetness wash away the dryness in my throat. And Madison, that smirk I saw, Austin's face darkened. She'd been trying to push you out for years. Said you were too involved, too opinionated. She wanted the house to herself, wanted to renovate everything, make it modern. He made air quotes around the word. When I snapped at you, she saw it as a victory. And now she's gone. The second the court ruling came through, she didn't even wait for me to come home. Just packed up the kids and left a note saying she was going to her parents. He laughed, a hollow sound. Turns out the house was the only thing she wanted to keep. I felt a sudden, unexpected pang of sympathy for my son, not enough to erase what he had done, but enough to see him as human again. Flawed. Broken. But human. What will you do now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. Try to see the kids. Get my finances under control. Find a place that feels like home again. I nodded, not making any promises, not offering solutions. This was his journey now. What about you? Mom, are you okay here by yourself? I looked around the kitchen, at the warm yellow walls, at Walter's apron hanging by the door, at the sunlight streaming through windows I had cleaned myself. I'm not by myself, I said. I have this house. I have Walter's memory. I have Eleanor, and surprisingly, Vanessa. I have a life I'm rebuilding. On my terms. Austin nodded. His eyes filling with tears, he quickly blinked away. I'm glad, he said. You deserve that. We talked for another hour, not about reconciliation or the future, but about simple things. The garden, the weather, the book I was reading. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. When he stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. Would it be okay if I came by again sometime? I thought about it, weighing the risk of letting him back into my life against the cost of shutting him out completely. Yes, I said finally. But not right away. I need more time. I understand, he said, and I believed he did. I watched from the porch as he drove away, feeling a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what had been lost, caution about what might come, but also a quiet hope that someday we might build something new from the ashes of what had burned. That evening, I called Vanessa. Austin came by today, I told her. Really, how was that complicated? I said honestly, but necessary, I think. She was quiet for a moment. The kids really miss you. Sylvia, Madison won't admit it, but they cry for you at night, especially Noah. My heart ached. I miss them too, more than I can say. What if, she hesitated, what if I brought them to see you, not right away, but maybe in a few weeks Madison's parents are planning a cruise in July. She's talking about leaving the kids with me while they're gone. The thought of seeing Noah and Emma again made my heart leap. Do you think she'd allow it? What she doesn't know won't hurt her, Vanessa said with a hint of steel in her voice. Those children need their grandmother, and you need them. We made tentative plans. Nothing definite, but a possibility. A hope. That was enough for now. After we hung up, I went out to the back porch and sat in the old rocking chair Walter had made when Austin was born. The evening was warm, the air heavy with the scent of roses. My wind chimes sang softly in the breeze. I thought about the months that had passed since that fateful dinner, the pain, the fight, the victory that felt hollow until I filled it with my own strength. I thought about Austin, broken and remorseful, about Madison, cold and calculating, about Noah and Emma, innocent and confused, and I thought about myself, not just as Austin's mother or Noah and Emma's grandmother, but as Sylvia, a woman who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, a woman who had reclaimed not just her house, but her dignity. The path forward wasn't clear yet. Relationships had been broken, trust shattered. But sitting there in the gathering dusk, listening to the familiar sounds of my home, I felt a peace I hadn't expected to find again. I had survived. I had fought. I had won. And now, I would rebuild not just walls and gardens, but bonds and boundaries. On my terms, with my strength, in my time. The wind chimes sang again, a gentle melody that seemed to say, "This is just the beginning. The best is yet to come." I smiled and rocked gently in Walter's chair, watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky. "You were right, Walter," I whispered. "People do change, but so do I." And in that quiet moment of acceptance, I found not just restoration, but rebirth. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know the city you're watching from. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to check out 2 other channel favorites. My daughter-in-law banned me from my grandchild's life until she needed my money. And after 40 years of marriage, my husband left me